What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas, your host for the evening. Thank you for tuning in to part one. If you have not, part one, I talked about the curious case of Cody Garbrandt. Is he in or is he out of UFC 213 and much, much more? But right now I'm going to talk about the action that went down May 19th, this past Saturday, with Rory MacDonald taking on Paul Daly in a main event fight for Bellator MMA. Fight in which Rory MacDonald was victorious. And not only did I think he was, not only was he victorious, but I thought after the fight was over, damn, that was an impressive performance. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, the consensus is that the competition level has dropped. Once a fighter leaves the UFC, he's not fighting against the same competition. And while that might be true, in this case, Paul Daly is a badass. This guy has been around for a long time in the sport of mixed martial arts. He stood toe-to-toe with some of the best fighters in the world. Real tough, durable guy that has shown that he's one of the best 170-pound strikers in the world today. Showed that in his last fight with Brendan Ward with that amazing flying knee knockout. A true killer in every sense of the word. And Rory MacDonald went in there after essentially 2 years of just injuries and mediocrity and frustration and really with his back against the wall in his promotional debut in Bellator. Had he lost versus Daly, who knows where his career would have went. And I thought that he performed. He came in, shot for the double leg takedown, got it, and then just rained down punches and then took his back and submitted him. And it was a really quick, beautiful, masterful performance where he kind of laid into him a little bit and then worked his back and got to the back mount and submitted him. So forced the tap. So what does this mean for Rory MacDonald's future? Now, obviously, the Bellator organization, Bellator MMA, has made so many amazing signings in the last couple months, last year, I should say, signings that I never thought that they would make. And a year ago, as a writer for MyFantasySportsTalk.com, a sports writer for MyFantasySportsTalk.com, I've written so many articles for the site, and most of them are MMA articles, and I talked about how Bellator needed to get out of this dark cloud that they were under of Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie and Dead F 5000 and just the fluke fights that they were putting on were not entertaining. And this last year, they've brought in Chael Sonnen, they've brought in Wanderlei Silva, setting themselves up for a collision course. They brought in Fedor Emelianenko, Matt Mitrione, Benson Henderson, Josh Thompson. They've brought in some real veterans of the game, guys that are former champions or were close to becoming a champion. And Ryan Bader and Phil Davis, who's now the Bellator light heavyweight champion. So there's really been a lot of movement from the UFC to Bellator. Lorenz Larkin was a real big signing for them as well. So they've done very well. And of all those signings, of all the moves that I thought they'd made that were very good, I thought Rory MacDonald was the best signing that they have ever made in the history of the company. Really, I said this during the Rory MacDonald fighter profile segment that I did a few weeks back. Rory MacDonald is probably one of the best UFC welterweights of all time to never win a title. If you really go and look at his resume, he beat Nate Diaz, he beat Tyron Woodley, he beat Damian Maia. He's beaten some of the best fighters in the world and really was oh so close to beating Robbie Lawler. But we all know Robbie Lawler in the 5th round is much different than Robbie Lawler in the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st round. If the fight goes, the full 5 rounds, and you're standing across from Robbie Lawler and it's the start of the 5th, you better be damn well ready for a war. And Rory MacDonald's face could literally not withstand any more punishment. One of the toughest guys in the UFC, and now he's one of the toughest guys in Bellator, and I honestly think he's the best fighter that Bellator has right now under their organization. The future is so bright after this win for Rory MacDonald versus Paul Daley. I think a collision course is set. Rory will fight the Bellator bantamweight champion Lima or Lorenz Larkin. I think he could easily beat both. And really, if you look at the MMA math side of things, Lima fought Paul Daley in a title bout, and Paul Daley, gave him a tough time. Paul Daley did not give Rory MacDonald a tough time whatsoever. That was an easy fight, easy win, easy money for Rory MacDonald. And I think that if Rory were to fight Lima, that would be a very easy fight as well. So, that being said, future Bellator champion, once thought of being the future welterweight champion of the UFC, I think he's going to get that title in Bellator, and I think he's going to be the guy that Bellator can build itself around. He's young, 27, 28 years old. He's got a lot left in the tank. His nose injury appears to be in fine form. His nose is back together, so to speak, as crazy as that is to say. He seems as if he is on the right path to where he wants to be. The path that he is foreseen for himself, he's following that path. And I think a definite fight that would be awesome is if they put him in big matchups, and he's talked about that as well, wanting to take on guys like Vanderlei Silva and Fedor. I don't know if that'll happen, being that he's a welterweight, but I do get the sense that Bellator is willing to do things for this guy. This is kind of the guy that they can kind of build the company around. And I like that idea. He's a juggernaut in Canada, juggernaut internationally with his success that he had in those fights with Robbie Lawler and the barn burner fight that he had with Carlos Condit. Everybody knows who he is. So no matter where he is fighting, he is a draw. He's an attraction. And with Bellator going back to Canada soon, I'd highly anticipate that Rory will be the main event on that card, maybe in that title fight. So, overall, the fights were decent. They weren't great. The fight between Czech Congo and whoever it was that he fought was very boring. I thought Czech Congo looked a little bit past his prime. And then you had just the fact that we were hoping to see Michael Venom Page in there, but that didn't happen. And I was really hoping to see more from Paul Daley, but Rory MacDonald just completely wore him down. The Liam McGeary Linton Vazal fight was very easy for Linton Vazal. That kid is very talented, and Liam McGeary had never been finished before, and he was finished by Linton on Saturday night. So, in terms of the light heavyweight strap, Linton Vazal could be the next fighter to take on the winner of Phil Davis and Ryan Bader, or maybe he will take on King Mo Lawal in King Mo's comeback fight. Let's not forget that King Mo was supposed to fight Ryan Bader at Bellator NYC, but Mo got hurt, and Phil Davis, the light heavyweight champion of Bellator, is stepping in to do this fight. So he's trying to avenge a loss that was done in the UFC. So I thought this was the fight that Bellator should have made all along with Phil Davis and Ryan Bader. But here we are. They'll be back, doing that fight again. So they have a few things working for them right now. And, my thoughts is whether Rory will get those fights with guys like Fedor and guys like Vanderlei Silva. I don't know about that, but what I do know is that I think Rory could be the champion in Bellator for quite some time. He could put in real work in Bellator and really add to his legacy. And then if he does want more money, he could get it and possibly go back to the UFC. But I think Bellator is treating him very well right now. They're paying him the way he wants to be paid. Really, essentially, the main difference in terms of pay within Bellator and the UFC is that the UFC pays fighters up front their show money to show up, make weight and show up to fight, but they have a win bonus, or, if they lose, they make less money. Where in Bellator, they get an upfront contract and they have sponsorship money. So, let's just say, for example, Rory MacDonald made $50,000. He made $50,000 to fight Paul Daly. Well, he made $25,000 or $30,000 in sponsorship money. And then maybe he got some sort of a win bonus as well. So there's three ways rather than just showing up for a meager salary of like $30,000, winning and getting $30,000, and then no sponsorship money at all, being that the UFC is sponsored by Reebok. So there's more opportunity for sponsors to come in and dictate how much you make. And obviously, Rory MacDonald kind of played up to the sponsorship predicament with the UFC and really was happy to have sponsors again in Bellator. He was wearing the red Everlast boxing trunks and with the Monster Energy logo on it. To have Everlast and Monster Energy, two big sponsors, Everlast especially, that was huge for Rory. So that was something that really bothered him during his time with the UFC, that Reebok was one of their main sponsors. They all wore the same thing and stuff like that. He wanted to just go back to the way it used to be. And Bellator is at that point right now where they don't have an official athletic sponsor, and I don't know if they ever will. So, Rory MacDonald, job well done. You got one in the win column. You continued your trajectory as a mixed martial artist upward, and like I said in the beginning of the show, realistically, Rory MacDonald could have had his back against the wall had he lost this fight, but he didn't. He stayed composed, went after Paul Daly, landed a beautiful jab on Paul Daly, by the way. That was a very well-timed jab. People think that a jab is such an easy technique, but it's really not. It has to be timed perfectly, especially if you're setting it up with a wrestling shot. And Rory threw that jab and then set up that wrestling shot beautifully on Paul Daly and was able to get him down, and essentially that was all she wrote. Very impressed with Rory MacDonald, and I think that fight with Lima is up next, or it might be Lorenz Larkin, and that would be two former UFC fighters going head-to-head in Bellator once again. So that was my take on Rory MacDonald. Job well done, winning his Bellator debut. In case you do not know how to follow the Thomas Take Sports podcast, my name is Ryan Thomas. You can follow the show on Spreaker.com. Follow me. Download the app. Get live updates. You can also get live updates on the Facebook. Facebook.com/Thomas Takeover. Like the page. You get more access to the podcast episodes. Not only the podcast episodes, but articles written by me, somewhat statements written by me on hot button issues in the wide world of sports, or hot headlines in the wide world of sports, I should say as well. You can also check me out on the YouTube channel, youtube.com. Go up to the search bar, Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Click subscribe. I get a lot of interaction on YouTube, so I want to tune in. I want you guys to tune in on YouTube, tune in on Spreaker. You can also tune in from the links on the Facebook page, and follow me on Twitter. My Twitter is @ThomasTakeover. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I will be right back for the last, third, and final part of today's show. Stay with me.